All right, welcome everyone. This is Nuaj back again with our NetSuite office hours where we do some live question and answers for our audience. But as we wait for folks to jump in here, Glenn, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Glenn Saunders, partner here at Nuage, and I've been doing ERP systems for 19 years. I'm going to cross 20 next year. But wide variety of system experience. Working with NetSuite, pretty involved since 2012. Lots of manufacturing type implementations, inventory, wholesale distribution. Just a wide variety of experience with the platform, and some of the new features with like MRP and some of those other supply chain enhancements they've come out with. Just don't ask me about retail because I'm not an expert on that or suite commerce, but I have people that are, so I can find the answers. But from my perspective, it's more of the nuts and bolts of it. And by trade, I have an accounting degree, although I've never practiced today. I went straight into doing consulting and just really love the nexus of technology, finance, operations, and all the different pieces that it brings together.
Right on. Well, thank you for the introduction. And for all of our audience members, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the comments. We will get through as much as we can today. As you guys are working on putting in your comments, I'll do a quick introduction. My name is Sterling Reeves, and I'm a NetSuite specialist here at Nuage. Been with the organization for over 2 years, but excited to answer some of your questions today. And this is, I think, our third live Q&A session we've been doing. So we're trying to do this every other Friday. So if we don't get to your question today, tune back in 2 weeks for another live Q&A session. All right. So we're starting to get a couple questions rolling in here. Let's see here. Here is a good one. Does NetSuite have a built-in health checker or anything similar?
Not entirely. There is a third-party product that we typically recommend and utilize for something like this called Chassis. And so what it does is it basically harvests all the information out of your NetSuite instance and looks for bottlenecks and processes. It basically does an analysis and machine learning on your system notes. So it knows how long it takes a sales order to go from order to quote or quote to order to cash, in this typical standard cycle. So it looks for bottlenecks and tries to identify fields that are maybe being updated multiple times or back and forth. But there's no built-in health checker. And I'm assuming you mean health of processes and procedures, not necessarily like script optimization, because there is the application performance monitor, which provides some of that from a script, time for page loads, if you have slow pages, things like that you can set up and set thresholds on to understand, like, why is my sales order, it takes 17 seconds to load and it only does it in this scenario. So application performance monitor can do that. Sorry, my allergies. Pretty well, but if you're really looking for a process map, process procedural operational document that says where do we have breakdowns in our procedures, that would be Chassis. So there is a product as well from, I'm trying to think, when we talk about health and auditability, oh gosh, it used to be called, I can't remember, but it'll self-document all of your customizations. It'll identify all of the breakdowns of where you have overlap of roles, responsibilities from an audit perspective. Here, I'm going to look that up while we're talking, and I will find that and respond, because I can't. It used to be called Strong Point. That's it. Strong Point. Haha.
And back on Chassis, I like Chassis because it really gives an objective view of everything. A lot of consultants kind of have their own school of thought, or we're trained differently, so you kind of get some subjectiveness when you're working with different consultants. But using Chassis, that really gives you an objective view of how these processes are set up and how long it takes, and it really identifies the bottlenecks and gives you a quantitative idea about your NetSuite environment.
Yeah, absolutely. What's really great about it is it it takes all of the, well, this and that out of it. It takes all the subjectivity, and it's like, it takes, 8 days for you to go from order fulfillment to invoice. Well, we have this and we have sign off here and there. Okay, that's 8 days in your cash cycle that is a real cost. Like that's money you're not getting just because you can't invoice on time. So it really removes the reason behind it and exposes the problems to approach it in a how do we solve the problem, not why is this happening approach, which is really advantageous.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to get set up with Chassis, feel free to reach out. Happy to provide an introduction for you. But moving on to our next question here. Here's a good one. Are there any irreversible configurations or settings within NetSuite? Anything that you can't undo?
There's quite a few, and I'm not going to pretend that I know the entire list. I can give you a few. I think multi-subsidiary customers and vendors is one. There's some defaulting you can't turn off. Account types, when you set up an account type on an account, you can't, if you post a transaction, you can't fix it. You've got to correct, inventory costing, turning on ARM. You turn on advanced revenue management, make sure you review what your item setup is. I can say I learned that one from personal experience, not in a good way. So there's quite a few. Typically the help will tell you when you're trying to activate something. Because I've been working in the system 12 years and I've broken ungodly amounts of functionality in testing, not in production, going through test scenarios and solutioning for customers. So the biggest thing I can say is make sure you have a sandbox or development or demo account and bang away at that thing. It's the best way to learn, in my opinion, is to screw it up and then figure out what you did wrong to fix it. So, but those are the ones that really come to mind when you're setting things up. Is that's not reversible. Some of the others I've seen, it's not that they're not reversible. It's that it's a pain in the ass. So, use kits instead of item groups. Well, what does that do for how you view inventory? And that's one personally that I've worked with a customer that's kind of struggled with a couple of things because of the way kits are done and the way they manage their inventory, it creates a lot of challenges. And there's some nuances with how data is structured within NetSuite as well, but that's a whole nother ball of wax. So, but I hope that provides enough context. Again, by no means an exhaustive list. If I look at enable features, there's going to be a ton of different things that are going to be, once you click it, you can't unclick it. But I certainly do not remember them off the top of my head. So
it would take a whole other session just to cover everything. This question actually reminds me of a quote recently. The quote was, "What's the best ERP insurance?" And it was, "Have a sandbox, have multiple sandboxes."
Absolutely. And you could spend a whole day just talking through the enable features, accounting preferences, just the check boxes in NetSuite. It's a lot of that. The other is if you enable this new suite tax functionality, you can't turn it off. So there's certain things that are unable to be turned off. So I'm just looking at the enable features page now, trying to see if I missed anything glaring. So
all right. Well, we will circle back if you do think of anything, but we've got a couple questions around subsidiaries. So let's go to this first one here. Do you have any best practices on moving customers from one subsidiary to another? Anything to keep in mind?
So I wouldn't move them, so to speak. I'm not even sure you can do that without a script update of some sort, which would violate. Really, you just have to enable multi-subsidiary customers. So that's the number one thing. I don't know if you can change the primary or not. I'd have to test that. I think it's a checkbox on the bottom that'll update the standard primary subsidiary field. But once you enable multi-subsidiary customers, you can put on the customer via sublist, and that goes for vendors too, by the way. all the different subsidiaries that are allowed to transact with that customer and or vendor. Yeah, so that one's fairly straightforward. There are some nuances with that. There is a dependency on another feature that can't be enabled, but I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. Once you click that button, it will tell you. And again, sandbox first. Don't just go straight into production with these things.
All right, here is another one on multiple subsidiaries. So is it possible for multiple subsidiaries sharing the same items to have different quantity price breaks?
No. You can do it by currency, but you cannot. You would probably need some sort of custom like lookup table off of the item, so a custom record to do that type of pricing. As far as I'm aware, the quantity price breaks will do it by different, different currencies, but it doesn't consider pricing by subsidiary to be different. You could set up a price group by subsidiary, and then based on the customer and the subsidiary combination, default it to that, but it's still not going to give you different quantity breaks. It'll update the pricing, but it's not going to say, well, this one is 10, 20, 30, 40, and the other one's 25, 50, 75, 100. It's not going to flip that without some sort of customization that I'm aware of. So, Sterling, you got the fire truck going by?
Yep, got the fire truck rolling by now.
You're at the office, I know. You know that's it.
So here is, where did that one go? Here we go. This is more of a subjective one, so get some opinion on this one. In what ways can executives optimize their use of NetSuite to maximize business growth potential? Kind of a loaded question, but interested to get your take on it.
So I think there's kind of two key things when I think about the value that an ERP system is supposed to deliver to a business. It's automation and efficiency in processes. And let me be clear, that does not mean everybody, like it's a lot easier to write something down on a piece of paper than it is to log it into a system for manufacturing. Yes, it's going to add time to their daily work. And there's ways to make it more optimized with scan guns and recording real-time manufacturing tablets and shop floor control stuff. But the reality is that there's certain places where the way they're doing things has to be transformed, okay, because the downstream effect. So I think that's one, is getting on board with this is the one place, the one source of truth, the Bible of the business, okay? I think that's one. And then identifying bottlenecks in your current procedures that can be automated, where 90% of the use cases, this. The 10% edge cases we isolate and deal with manually the way we're doing today. I think that provides a lot of value. Cost savings, time savings, all the different things that executives look for when they take to this. And I realize that time savings is very hard to quantify with an ERP system. But the reality is, it. It's like, it when you see it, right? You see that you're more efficient in processes. And the beauty of that is if you do those two things, all of that funnels down into better information to make better decisions. And I think one of the things, and this is something that I've been working on for us internally, is metric tracking. So what are the key metrics that manage the business? And we're a small business, right? It's pretty easy to understand, but as we grow, what are the key metrics? And we use NetSuite internally. What are the things that I need to be looking at on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to know how we're performing? How are we doing? What are the things that we may need to tweak? Our sales guys hitting quota? Or what's our utilization? What's our customer satisfaction? And using those and exposing those in a meaningful way within NetSuite to drive business performance. I think, if you start going a step further with the FP&A stuff and just understanding where you are forecast to goal, what's working, what's not, and driving those types of discussions within the organization. And I think And this goes back to more just strategic consulting or thinking about the business, but what's the driving force? What's the one thing that everybody in the business can get behind, and using your ERP system to showcase that? In our status department, it is customer satisfaction. All I care about. Customer satisfaction. Now, that doesn't mean the customer's always right. Obviously, there's times where there's some nuances to that, but like, are they happy with the service we delivered, and were we delivering on what we said we would do? And that the whole team knows it. It's all about keeping them happy and making sure they're getting the most out of their investment with NetSuite and their investment with us. And also I'll throw another softball at Chassis, but if you're concerned about whether or not you have the right procedures and processes in place, Chassis is a great health check to say, oh, we've got bottlenecks here and here, or where's bad data. It's not going to analyze your data to say where bad data is coming from, but and also I will say, I don't think NetSuite's the be all end all for like a data analytics tool set. I think Analytics Warehouse, Power BI, we've got customers using Looker, Tableau, whatever it is, for high level visualization. But what an ERP system does know is numbers, and it knows income, cost of goods sold, profitability, trend analysis. And a lot of people don't understand how to use like the KPI scorecards or analytics workbooks. And I feel that's something that I think more people should be taking advantage of. I've done a ton of work with the pivot tables and charts and graphs. The charts still need some work in the analytics workbook. You hit roadblocks really quick for colors and threshold. Like, there's a lot of feature functionality that's just missing, to be quite honest, for the charts and graphs. But the ability to combine different data elements the way you can in analytics and then put them on your dashboard is very, very helpful. So I think those are kind of the core tenets I look at when I think about how an ERP system, and in this case, particularly NetSuite, can help drive growth and drive business potential, right? Because if you're waiting and if you're waiting 30 days to figure out how you did 30 days ago, you're 60 days behind, right? You should know today what your revenue numbers are going to be, what your utilization going to be, and using that real-time information to make ad hoc or quicker business decisions is something that, assuming you make a good decision, is going to make a real impact to the business. So,
yeah, having the data is one thing, but being able to access and manipulate the data, it's all about being able to have that data-driven decision making. One of the comments that came in on this question was all about proper change management. And so I was going to see if you had any insights or opinions about if an organization is going through an ERP evaluation or implementation, what are best practices around change management?
Oh man, this is a tough one. And the only reason I say it's tough is there's so many avenues, but I'm a big believer of defining the goal, at least the end goal, right? It doesn't have to be the be all end all, but what inevitably happens with an ERP project is you get to a point and somebody goes, we can't do that. We have to do X, Y, and Z. And so then you start to change. All right. And you start to adapt NetSuite to your processes instead of vice versa, which is not a bad thing. But I believe defining the end goal, what does the end zone look like? And sticking to that through thick and thin, and getting people on board to understand that it's not a revolution. And to quote Louis, who's probably watching this in Japan, it's not a revolution, it's an evolution. So there may be things that don't occur as quickly as they should, but the cohesiveness and the overall everybody in one house makes such a difference from NetSuite. And I think project and business owner champions is critical to the success, because they have to own their process and procedures in their area and making them accountable for vetting the requirements, for vetting that it works. Because you know what? The consultants can do all the training in the world. They can talk to individuals, they can showcase it. But at the end of the day, if the business owner of accounts payable doesn't make sure her team signs off on it, make sure her team does it, it's going to fail. They're not going to know what to do day one. And I think that's the biggest thing, is so much is put on the, it's a joint effort. And you have to have that open communication of where you think the consultant team needs more to do more and where the internal team needs to do more. One of my biggest things is not so much the change management, it's communication through the project. That to me is critical. And so many times I've seen executives swoop in at the last minute and they're all upset about something, and it's because their team didn't do end user testing the way they were supposed to. They had the scripts, they went through it all, they said it was fine, but did they really? And I'll take some ownership from a consultant standpoint too. You need to make damn sure they do it. You need to go to the executive and say, here it is. I need your sign off on this, like those types of things. Because if not everyone is aligned on the goals and what the end result needs to look like, you end up in this pissing match between both parties, and it's just not good for anyone. So communication, be upfront about requirements, and don't move the goalpost. I think those are three critical things. And when I say don't move the goalpost, I understand things happen. Acquisitions or something gets uncovered, but understand the detrimental effect that can have at the overall project, both from a cost and time perspective. So
some good insights. I also think, this was a lot of good perspective for internal change management. But I think another good thing to consider is if you're going through a big implementation, choosing the right partner. I know here, to kind of toot our own horn a little bit, we always say that choosing the right ERP is only half of the equation. The other half is choosing the right implementation partner. So making sure that you're working with the right team that's going to take the time to understand your needs and work towards the goals collectively is also a huge part of the battle.
Yeah. And somebody you trust you're going to have bad conversations. Things are going to get rocky at some point, but somebody that you feel confident is going to be there to support you and assist you through the challenges.
Well, we definitely went down a rabbit hole kind of talking about change management, but wanted to get back to some of the questions that we have directly related to NetSuite. So let's see here. Here's one. How do I allocate actual on-hand inventory to a project?
So there's a couple of ways you can do that. And I'm not sure I have the right answer, because this is a little bit of it depends, which I hate saying that. That's such a consultant cop out. But all right, so you could do order reservations where you can allocate it directly to the customer. I do not believe you can allocate it direct to the, I'm going to look right now, direct to the project. Okay. But you can do it to the customer, at least at that level, to allocate it down, or you could use a sales channel. There's a couple of different ways, but you can do specific allocation of inventory. What we have one customer that does, where they want to allocate specific inventory to an order, into a work order, and then ultimately a sales order, is they use lots, which is not ideal. You're kind of working around the system. But other than that, there's no real way to peg, that I'm aware of, and to peg inventory in the system to a particular order without a sales order. If you have a sales order for the project, you can obviously do that, but this sounds more like construction or engineer to order manufacturing, where you're using a project to capture all that, and you want to be able to allocate inventory to it, even though you don't have a transaction in the system, because a project is not a transaction. It's a sub-customer effectively. So, not like, it's either a customization or a workaround. You could certainly create a sales order from the project and allocate it that way, but then ultimately you're going to have to fulfill it or cancel the sales order once it's consumed into the project. And there's some assumptions in there that I'm making around, it's a construction type or engineer to order project-based manufacturing type organization. So yeah.
All right, some good insights. All right, here's another one. Is there a way to add additional cost to an existing fixed asset that has not yet been depreciated?
So my assumption here, there's two ways. Um, if it's a different transaction, even if it's not, you can create another asset tied to the same type and the same longevity, and then do a build compound asset, and it'll basically combine those assets together. If it's a separate transaction, like a vendor bill, you can create an asset or assign it to that existing asset. But build compound assets is going to be the easiest way. And I'm no expert in fixed assets, but I do know that the build compound assets is going to be a way where you can combine multiple assets, even after it's depreciated. If you have additional, like a leasehold improvement or something to an existing building, which I know leasehold improvements are typically tracked elsewhere, but like that's how you can combine asset values for management. So
This actually reminds me of a conversation I was having with one of our clients this week that I was meaning to ask you earlier. So putting you on the point now is just a good of time. They were asking if it's possible to depreciate fixed assets without the fixed asset module within NetSuite, or how would you go about doing this?
you could do memorized transactions. You could do an amortization against the fixed asset account. Those are really the only two ways. And I'll give a plug to my company I used to be a part of. Kraft has a Kraft Enterprise Systems, or what are they called now? I think they're just KES now. We just talked with Glenn, but other Glenn. But they have a product called Easy Assets, which I think is a lot less cumbersome than what fixed assets is in NetSuite. So I'll give them a plug here because we're a partner of theirs, and they do good work on those types of things. They have a lot of cool little suite apps, and that's one of them.
Yeah, KES is a great partner.
Yeah.
All right, let's see here. Is there a way to prompt NetSuite to ignore a PO when calculating what is needed in the order items application?
I do not believe so. Supply is supply and demand is demand. I think this came up last time where someone was wanting to exclude a order, either a purchase order or sales order from MRP. And if it's an approved transaction state, it's going to see it and assume that it's there. What you could do, this is the assumption is you're using reorder point, and there's no real way to manipulate that page. There's no customization that can be done that I'm aware of. Yeah, nothing that I can think of on that one.
Sometimes just working within the limitations of NetSuite is the best way to go about it.
Yeah.
All right. Pulling up the next one here. Is there a way to create purchase orders through OCR natively in NetSuite? If not natively, are there any alternatives to doing this? We get a lot of POs from vendors, and I'd like to make the input easier.
Natively within NetSuite, no. There are partners, I believe, Paulty, Stamply, some of the AP automation vendors have this functionality that will automate both vendor bills and purchase order creation. So I would definitely look for those. And those, I mean, bill capture is great, and I think NetSuite's moving in that direction. But the reality is I do not have a inkling when they would roll that type of functionality out. So that I would definitely look at third-party options, Paulty, Stamply. I'm sure I'm missing some. I'm not intending to. I don't have an affinity for either one. They're all great, but I think AvidXchange may be the other big player in the market. But yeah, I would look at a third-party OCR vendor. Yeah, and there's honestly, that technology has improved so dramatically in the last 5 or 6 years. I know I looked at it for our Anapact application, and man, it was expensive to do really, really high quality OCR capture. And now it's gotten like so much better with just everything. So it's kind of it's been fun to see that stuff is coming a little bit down market and making it more accessible to smaller and mid-sized businesses.
That is cool to see. All right. Got one more coming in here. All right. When entering a PO from a vendor, when will that hit our AP or come due for us to pay cash flow wise? We can only see the POs that have been received and billed already.
Yeah, so what I have done before is it's pretty easy to build a report that will look at the PO date, and then once it's delivered, you know, and expect you basically have to build a formula. They typically invoice us 10 days after, and then we get 30-day terms. And you use that calculation to say, here's when that expected cash outlay is going to do. You can do this a couple of different ways. You could put it in as so I've seen this done with some other customers using custom transactions, but you could also just create a report out of it in analytics. And I know Cash 360, but it's really hard to forecast that out. Now, what you can do is take the account that it will be hitting and forecast that out for 6 weeks. And it'll look at prior history and then forecast that out from a cash flow perspective. But if you're wanting to know the expected due date of a particular purchase order and how that's going to affect your cash position, you really have to kind of create your own report to say the PO receipt date, because you know the receipt date that you typically invoice 5 days after. We get 30-day terms, therefore we're going to pay this in 35 days after item receipt. And so there's some built-in assumptions there that may or may not be correct. I know I've had this argument multiple times with customers or debate, like, well, their terms are 30. That's when it should be received. It's like, well, how many times do they pay 30 days? So you get a little bit more flexibility with that. You can also do a calculation based on average days to pay by vendor and use that calculation as a calculated field on the vendor record that can be updated via mass update or script or something. So there's a lot of different ways to do it, but there's no native inherent because it's all when that receipt hits and then how quickly they can invoice. And then you can get really complicated with it of what about weekends and holidays? You have to exclude that from the calculation. So yeah.
So if you were to create a basic report, how difficult is that for your average end user? Is that something that your average NetSuite user with average experience would be able to do on their own, or is that something that you recommend working with a team on? How difficult is creating that report?
I think with that one, because it involves updating quite a bit of data related to the vendor record, you would need some consultative help. Plus, the formula can get a little complicated and where the data needs to be stored. So we need to know the receipt date, and then we would be able to forecast out the expected pay date and the expected voucher date or bill date. And then you could build that in. I would probably try to do it in analytics just because I like that tool more now. I'm getting kind of used to it. So I think it's one of those things that you could do a lot of it by yourself, but you probably need a little bit of insight of how the formula would actually work and how you may want to take into account your average days to pay certain by each vendor type of thing. And then the analysis, see, you're going to have to do some analysis too of the receipt was here, the bill date was here. So you would want average time to bill by each vendor as well to build your calculation. So there's a little bit of work that goes into it.
Also kind of a loaded question too, kind of subjective on everyone's experience and capabilities. But when in doubt, get some help.
Yeah. Yeah. And the beauty of NetSuite is the ability to add fields and track them. I mean, God, it just makes life so much easier than some of the older solutions I used to work with. So.
I think we are coming to the end of all the comments and questions as of now, but we'll give it another minute. In the meantime, Glenn, question for you. What are you most excited about or looking forward to in the 24.2 release?
It's a good question. Put me on the spot here, man. I've looked at the release notes and I have, I'm kind of, so they've improved some of the AP automation. They've improved a lot with the manufacturing. And a lot, I'm really digging the little suite apps that they're delivering, like Cash 360. They finally improved the cost of bill of material inquiry. They're doing a lot with bank feeds, different things, and just interoperability. But I love the warehouse side of things, and I think they're doing a lot there to help small, mid-sized manufacturing. And to date myself, when I first started with NetSuite, they didn't have they had work orders and assemblies, and that was it. They didn't have web routing. They didn't have any semblance of a WMS. So now you're starting to see they're building somewhat of a and it doesn't mean that partners like RF Smart's not going anywhere, but they're building a fairly cohesive strategy around how you can do manufacturing mobile, how you can do warehouse management all in one single platform. Not to mention shipments. I mean, we don't work with a ton of customers that do parcel shipping. A lot of them do 3PL for the parcel shipping. So, but I think those types of things and the MRP enhancements and better supply chain visibility have it's been nice to see that they're continuing to invest in those areas that I think again, those are fun areas. And I still think, manufacturing is coming back pretty heavily to the States after years of not to get on that, but we just see it more, right? Even if you got strategic vendors overseas that are doing stuff, you still have to manage that supply chain. The post-COVID world is just very, very different for those types of things. And what's really funny is, as a solution architect, I get these demo accounts all the time, and I'm starting to see some of the stuff that have been in demo accounts for a while, like the cost variance analysis, and now they're publishing those apps and like the advanced cost of bill of material. There's just all these things they're starting to pick, bring in scrap codes. One thing I don't understand, I'm gonna be honest, from manufacturing, is why they don't have a return to stock from a work order issuance. We've done that for customers as a customization, but if anybody from NetSuite's watching this, come on, guys. A lot of times they issue material to a job and then need to return it. Like every manufacturer. I'm sure they're going to listen to that. So yeah, so just continuing to build on that. And some of the allocation functionality, they're finally starting to update. So they're just moving in the right direction in a lot of different ways. So
it is pretty cool to see the evolution of NetSuite from the, even 5 or 10 years ago up to date, and then thinking about what it's going to be in another 5 or 10 years. Just impressive to see how they're always evolving and trying to meet the needs of customers and market demands.
Yeah, and I'll say one thing that I think is going to be great, but I would caution anyone from doing this day one, is the new Redwood experience, which you can enable. Even if you're not on Redwood, you're going to get collapsible things at the top to make your screen more optimized so you don't have to scroll as much. The problem with the Redwood experience is it's going to remove a lot of the themes that you're used to. So your blues, grays, greens, knowing which environment role you're in. And again, I personally don't see any real value in it yet, because what I'm looking for is an interchangeable widget on a sales order screen where I can add reports, graphs, information that's going to help me make that process more streamlined as widgets. And I know that's probably the end goal, but they're not there yet. So to me, it's very beta, to talk a little trash, but I saw when they did this the first time with the rewrite in 2016, with the changing the way NetSuite's user interface looked, and it takes a little bit of time because there is so much that goes into the user experience and the user interface. So again, I think they'll get there. I've never seen them not get there, but I've got it turned on in one of our development accounts, and I see it just adds a bunch of white space and no real value. So I'm just being honest.
Word to the wise. Well, we have ran out of all comments or questions here. So I guess before we wrap up, Glenn, is there any departing thoughts or comments that you want to leave for our audience today?
No, I just hope everybody didn't get bored of hearing me talk about NetSuite. But if there's any questions, anything you think I got wrong, don't hesitate to email me or set up. Happy to talk. Don't claim to know everything. Just been here a while, and a lot of this is my opinion over what I've seen over the years. So, yeah.
Well, we appreciate everyone viewing in this week, and if you think of any questions, feel free to reach out or join us in 2 weeks on August 16th for our next NetSuite office hours with some live question and answers. In the meantime, reach out to Nuage for any of your NetSuite consulting needs. Catch you next time.
Awesome. Thanks, Sterling.
Thanks, Glenn. Have a good one.